How's all the family doing? I've seen Bert yesterday in basketball.
Oh, did you? Everyone's doing well. That's right.
I'll make sure not to be.
Well, they decided to do some other reason. It's like, at what point do we acknowledge that this road has a lot of accidents? There's two of us. Yeah, I'm the third one beside us. Yeah, I'm the no, Jake is there's a lot.
Do that. And then this, that is on. So go ahead and you can try to test that out.
And
Black.
Yeah, because this will be back and forth, right?
And you let me know if it needs to be higher.
Oh. Thank you.
School.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I guess the silence tells us it's time for us to start. So we're happy to do that. Thank you all for being here tonight. My name is Chuck Wagner, and I am superintendent here for King William County Schools, and I'm joined by some fellow colleagues, Stacy Longest, who is our Director of Finance and Budget, and then also our school board chair happens to be here, Ms. Terry Stone. Thank you for being here. And Mrs. Stone is going to share some information in our presentation this evening about the county's tax structure and what some of the implications are for schools. But we're here tonight. We're also live streaming this evening as well. So if there are folks that are tuned in at home, we welcome you to the conversation as well. Our goal this evening was to, or is to, share some information with the public and with you folks that are here about the budget development process for the school division. This is tonight's conversation is not intended to be specifically about the upcoming budget, because that's a conversation that will occur with our school board as we begin some of those discussions a little later this fall and into the spring, but more so just to share information on what are the components of a school division's annual budget, the steps that it goes through to create its budget, some of the budget considerations, categories of expenditures and revenue and things like that. And just to give folks a chance to see what it's like for a school division to try to assemble a budget each year. It's not an easy process. And we thought that tonight would be a helpful opportunity to give citizens a chance to maybe get a closer look inside of that process, but also to have some back and forth discussion or a chance to ask some questions. We've given you each a card if you would like to jot a question or two down if we don't have time to get to those this evening. But if you do have a question and you'd like to present that to us, we'll turn the microphone on at the podium so that folks at home can hear the question as well, and then we'll do our best to respond to that. So with that, we'll spend the first half of the evening or so doing some direct presentation. If there are some questions, we'll invite those along the way, but we do have some information that we'd like to get through. And I see that many of you have a copy of the slides already. So hopefully we can do this in an efficient manner and then can open up some time at the end for some back and forth dialogue. So thanks so much. A little bit about our presentation agenda. We have some slides, and we're sharing these also on the live stream so folks at home can see. But we wanted to spend just a moment and talk about our newly adopted strategic plan. We've got some school budget definitions that we feel will be helpful to talk about. We'll present the budget calendar that was recently adopted by the school board. Mrs. Longus will talk specifically about the budget process, and we'll go into some revenues and expenditures, some current year appropriations, and then I think that'll lead itself into the discussion about some considerations that the community can make, in the coming year. And we've got a sample methodology that we'd like to present to you, just to sort of give you an illustration of different ways that an administrative team can begin to assemble a budget. And then Mrs. Stone will talk a little bit about split levy and some explanations there that'll be helpful. And then we'll open up some time at the end for questions. So we'll try to stick to a time frame and we'll go to the next slide. So the school division has recently adopted a new strategic plan. We worked with a consultant to help us kind of reimagine some goals and objectives for the school division. And we'll share those here in just a moment. But one of the first things you'll see, actually two components for a strategic plan, you'll hear the term mission and you'll hear the term vision. And many strategic plans incorporate these two concepts. But sometimes there's not a clear understanding of the distinction between the two. And so thought it would be helpful just to articulate that a mission is what an organization does. So it briefly describes our core work and our purpose in very simple terms. And then the vision of an organization is what it aspires to be. It's an aspirational statement. So it describes its ideal outcomes for the people that it serves. And so we'll go to the next slide and you'll see our adopted mission and vision statement. And again, the mission very simply is to provide our students with learning experiences that prepare them for future success. And ideally, a mission statement applies to a student that's in pre-kindergarten all the way to a student that's a senior in high school and prepared to graduate. And then our vision sort of captures some of the ideals for the school division. Being an inclusive community, we'd like to inspire and empower all students to find a purpose, to develop essential skills and create a bright future. And we nurture resiliency, a love of learning, and a sense of worth in each individual. So hopefully you can see the difference between these two terms and these two concepts. One, again, describes what we do, and the other describes what we would like to be in our ideal world. We've identified some core values in the school division. I won't read each of these to you, but I will identify them. Accountability. We believe that that's important. Obviously, Public schools, and King William is no different. We are a public entity, and it's important for us to be accountable for the work that we do. And I am going to hold myself to that standard as well. So accountability is one, citizenship is another. I think one of the most important things that a school division can do is to produce people who are ready to participate and contribute in their community. Collaboration, we recognize that that's a skill that all young people need to learn, and certainly some adults need to learn that as well. So collaboration is important. Just like respect is also a welcoming environment, founded on civility and free from bullying and discrimination. And then compassion, inclusivity, and integrity. And I think wrapped into some of those core values are things that I believe in, like clear and open communication, transparency, trust. And I want all members of our community to recognize that that we are here to serve the community, and that's our primary role. And we're going to do our best to stick to our mission each and every day. So we have some goals in the strategic plan. We have 5 broad goals. The first goal is student learning and growth. And we haven't yet, as an organization, developed our performance measures. That's the next step in our process. Our school board just adopted the framework of the strategic plan at its last meeting. And so the next step in the process is to begin to identify some performance measures. And so we'll be doing that over the next several months. Second is high quality and committed workforce. Third is student and staff well-being. Fourth is family engagement and community partners, because the school division is a reflection of the community, and the community is a reflection of the school division, and it's important for us to have a mutual relationship. And fifth would be operational excellence and efficiency. And just want to touch on something related to efficiency and effectiveness. The two are not synonymous, but I think they need to be used together. So an efficient organization might not be effective, and an effective organization might not necessarily be the most efficient. But it's important to try to find the balance between the two. And I think this evening, one of the things, hopefully one of the takeaways that each of you will have is this inherent tension, so to speak, this organizational tension that is built into the work that we do. And I think this notion of efficiency and effectiveness is an example of that. I've got some colleagues in the room that would have heard me say this notion of the tension between freedom versus order. How much autonomy can the school division have versus how much structure does it need to accomplish its goals and objectives. So there's an inherent tension in much of the work that all of us do in our organizations, and the school division is no different. I thought it would be helpful to share a little bit of philosophy, so to speak, on what budgeting is. And I'm going to give you a public school perspective. This was shared by a former colleague of mine, a former superintendent, a former chief financial officer of a school division who now is a consultant with the Virginia School Boards Association. But simply stated, budgeting is a process. It's not necessarily a thing, but it's a process that structures and describes how fiscal and human resources will be allocated and utilized over a stated period of time to support the achievement of the organization's goals and objectives. And so a few moments ago, you saw the 5 broad goals in the strategic plan. And so our budget is intended to capture some essential work that's going to begin to address each of those 5 goals. A fully funded school division budget should translate the priorities, values, and needs of the school community. And so the other thing that I would ask for you to leave with tonight is that the budget really is a statement of community values, and where we are able to invest our money, is really a statement of what it is that we intend to value over the course of that period of time. It doesn't mean that difficult decisions need to be made, because We're here tonight to talk about the school division's budget, but the county has lots of budgets that they need to consider as well. And there's only so many ways to slice up the pie. But we're here to talk about the school division's budget and the future for our children. And, many of us believe that, that's worth every penny that we can afford to spend. And then lastly, a budget is an estimate of the revenues and expenditures for a set period of time. It's a framework within which the organization works, but at the end of the day, it really is only an estimate. And there are lots of reasons and lots of factors that influence those estimates. Another statement that I'll share is that responsible fiscal and financial management is a cornerstone of an effective educational program. Today's climate requires accountability for school boards, school administrators, teachers, and the community at large. And school finance policies and practices should be developed and implemented to promote transparency and public trust. And I use those terms not lightly because I think it's important that our community understands that we do have a desire to be transparent and to provide information, and we want our community to trust the work that we do and the decisions that we make. So we wanted to share a few key definitions for you. These are probably worth reading, even though you have these in your handouts. One of the most important factors, so to speak, that influences a school division's budget is the number of children that show up to school. And so the term that's used in the state of Virginia is called average daily membership, and the acronym that we use is ADM. And we track this figure monthly. We report to the school board monthly what our enrollment figures are. And these numbers fluctuate. Enrollment can fluctuate day to day. It fluctuates week to week, month to month, and year to year. It's possible, for example, to have 20 students move in tomorrow that we didn't expect, and to have 30 move out the next day that we didn't expect. Some communities have much more movement fluctuation and enrollment. Military communities have quite a bit. In some communities, there's a turnover of 50% of the student population in any given year. So we're fortunate in King William that we have relatively stable enrollment, but nonetheless it fluctuates, and it's a number that we track. You'll notice here that we are required to serve children. All children, including students with disabilities, between the ages of 5 and 21. And often a community will only recognize children until they graduate. But for students with disabilities who have a need for services, they are eligible for services up until their 22nd birthday. And often those are the children, and you'll see this in just a little bit. Those are the children whose education costs more than children who don't require those intensive services. And sometimes that's not reflected in a common school division budget that you might see, but it's a consideration that we need to make each and every day. It's possible for a family to move into our community next week that we weren't expecting, and the child to require services, educational services that we are unable to provide. And so the school division then is responsible for ensuring the provision of services for that child, even if it's in an outplacement facility. And in some cases, the tuition for that one child might be $50,000 a year for one child. School divisions are responsible for that. And again, that's sometimes lost in translation. And communities are responsible for that. Our community has a partnership that invests in education for certain students with disabilities. And again, it's a component of a budget, but sometimes it's not well understood. But average daily membership is calculated and defined a certain way. And you do that by dividing the total aggregate daily membership, which is days present plus days absent. It's even the days that kids don't come to school are days that they're eligible to come to school and days that services are provided. You divide that number by the total number of days that school was in session from the first day through the last day in March. And so we do what's called a September 30 count. That's our official enrollment for the year. And then we do another, it's March 31st, and it's called our March 31st ADM. And annual funding is determined by that March 31st ADM. So another key definition, we thought it would be helpful for you to know that the Code of Virginia does have a definition of budget, and it is the duty of the superintendent each year to develop and present to the school board a budget of need that the school board can consider, that the school board can review and make changes and edit with community input. And then we present that budget to the funding body of our community, which is the Board of Supervisors, for their consideration and approval. But the key here, I think, is it's the development of a budget of need. And there's the tension, because some people think we don't need a lot and other people think we need twice as much as we have. So you can see how some of this is baked into the process. So it's really reaching consensus on that need, recognizing that we probably can't address every need equally at the same time. And then we have a term here called enrollment. That's probably a more common term, and that's all the students in the division that the school division is responsible for reporting. And it's not just the students that are attending our 4 schools here in the community, but it's also attending some of the schools where students are outplaced. It's counting for students that might have some of their educational programs in a satellite facility, like a career or technical education center, and or students for one reason or another who might be medically homebound or on home-based instruction. So it accounts for all of the students that the school division is responsible for reporting, and we have to track them all. And this is as kids come in and out. And then Mrs. Longest is going to talk a little briefly about another key budgetary figure. Enrollment is one, or ADM, and the second one is a community's local composite index, and the acronym is the LCI. And she'll talk just a little bit about that. So thank you.
Good evening. This is a formula that is generated through the General Assembly. And if you can go to the next slide, I have a couple slides on this. So the composite index is really the ability to pay. So it's determines the locality's ability to pay, is calculated using the true value of real estate, the adjusted gross income, and the taxable retail sales. The adjustments are completed every 2 years to maintain an overall statewide local share of 45%, and the state share at 55%. So where we are with our local composite index currently, so the budget in which we're starting to work on for next year, we will be provided that LCI number in November of 23. But you can see here the 22 to 24 rate and the 20 to 22 rate. We're preliminarily hearing that our rate will increase during the 24-26 timeframe due to the property tax values increasing after the assessments. If our rate is to increase, that will show our localities' ability to fund, therefore the state portion would possibly decrease. So that's something that we will be tracking closely, and we'll be notifying the Board of Supervisors and the school board as soon as that information comes out.
And just to give you some comparison, if you can go back one slide, you can see that the LCI fluctuates every 2 years. And so the higher your LCI, the less state funding you receive, because the index means that the community has the ability to pay more. The highest LCI value is 0.8, and there are communities in Virginia that have a 0.8 LCI. Fairfax City is one, Lancaster County is one, and there are, a handful of others. But those communities have what the state would consider more of an ability to fund education, and so they would need less state funding. So you can see if we're in the 0.3, 0.3 and a half range, If the LCI goes up, though, then that means that King William is expected to contribute more to public education, and the state would be expected to contribute a little bit less.
All right. You can take us to the next slide. Yep, budget schedule. So just to give you an idea of how the budget schedule works, we start the process. So our fiscal year runs from July to June. And so we start the process in September. So we're 3 months into our current school year and our current budget, and we're already starting for the next year. In September, we're working with our school board on a calendar for the next year. October, Dr. Wagner, myself, and Director of HR have been having weekly meetings to start planning for the budget process. In October, we also, the finance team has been busy building the budget tools that we send out to the schools and to all the administrative teams to put the information in to present back to us. Beginning in November, you'll see that we'll start working with sending out those tools and working with the school administration directly and the directors of, operations and transportation and nutrition and all the different areas that come into the budget process. And then those budget packets due back to myself on November 20th. And then the finance team will start going through those packets, getting them ready, answering any questions, putting any values in that may be missing. And those, the school administrators and the directors will then present that budget information to administration the first week of December. Around the 17th of December, we are looking for usually for the state preliminary state revenues to come out from the governor's budget. And so we get that information anywhere between the 17th and the 20th of December. And then if you'll flip over in January is when we really kind of start presenting the budget. So we're asking for any input. So anyone that has any ideas or anything that they would like for us to consider in the budget, we have a public input on January 16th's board meeting. That's where you can come and put out any ideas that you have. On January 23rd, we will have our first budget session. That's going to be our first kind of full budget that we'll present as a preliminary basis to our school board to get feedback for. In February and March, at the beginning of March, we'll work with our school board to get an approved budget from our school board at that point on March 12th. And this is a tentative date, but we have worked with the board clerk at the Board of Supervisors office on that date. We would have our joint meeting with the Board of Supervisors where we would walk through our budget in detail. And then from there, in March, the county administrator presents their budget to the Board of Supervisors. April, we from time to time have had to do additional presentations to the Board of Supervisors and different things like that. There is usually a public hearing from the Board of Supervisors side in early April. And then we usually adopt a budget in May. We have adopted as late as June in the years in which the state budget took longer. But this past year, we were able to adopt and get appropriations in April, late April, which was really good and gave us time to ensure we had contracts out and things timely. So that's kind of our budget walkthrough as to what we're doing each month starting in September. Once we get that appropriation in April, May, we're then building those budgets into our financial system so that we're ready to go on July 1 for our school year to start, our fiscal year to start all over again. If you can go to the next slide. So I've kind of explained some of that in detail from there. This is, where the schools come together and provide us their needs and requests. Directors the same way. This is also when we build our capital budget. We're all year long looking at what capital needs are needed throughout the schools, and we're making a list, but this is really when we pull all of that information together, try to get quotes and things like that. The state revenue, this is an example of what the calc tool looks like. It's based on line, based on fiscal year, and it pulls from the top the ADM. So we're estimating what our ADM is going to be in the future. We have been very, our board in the past and our superintendent has been very, to try to keep it, I guess, conservative on how many. We never want to estimate we're going to have more people than we have because then there's cuts that come down the road. So this year, our budget was based on 2,000 students and we're hovering a little over 2,000. But the SRC was just, the fall SRC was just finalized, but that really, like Dr. Wagner said, that's really based on that March 31st number and with the fluctuations that could occur. I think I touched on all of that. Funding is determined not just by the ADM, but state sales tax projections, the number of English language learners that we have, and then our special education is based on a December 1st count there. To walk through our fiscal year 2024 revenues, we have our state sales tax. And that is a projection from DOE that's provided through that calc tool. And then we have our next is state revenues. That is also projected by DOE, and that is provided based on our ADM. Our federal revenues is made up of our title grants. They are pretty consistent from year to year and have specific purposes, from resources for struggling learners to professional development to English as a second language, special education, Indian education, and the URSA funding, in which 2024 will be the last full year of funding in the URSA funding from the COVID pandemic. Local revenues are made up of our levy revenues of real estate, personal property, our B-poll tax, which is the business tax, our motor vehicle tax, meals tax, and our local sales tax. Other revenues is made up from tuition income. Those are students that do not reside in the county that would like to come to the county. They pay tuition to us. It's also interest on our bank account, miscellaneous grants. We are lucky to win quite a few grants a year, Versa, Dominion Energy, and then also some surplus property sales in that number. And then our debt service, that's a revenue that comes in from the levy revenues from the real estate, personal property from the county, but the county pays our debt. So really it just shows as a revenue and an expense on our side. On the expenses, that's my notes. 68% of our expenses go directly to instruction. So that's 21,621,570. Instruction is made up of all the teacher positions, guidance counselors, paraprofessionals, professional services, supplies, and supplies within the schools. Administration, attendance, and health line is made up of school psychologists, nurses, school board, superintendent, HR, and finance. And that includes all services related to those. Audit fees, our services for paying for our software, different things like that. Transportation is consisted of the bus drivers, the bus maintenance staff, our fuel bills, and any repairs to our current school buses. Operation and maintenance consists of custodian and maintenance staff, our electricity and water bills, supplies, and cleaning materials, and any repairs we have throughout the year that are small repairs. Anything large gets presented over on the capital side. Our technology line consists of our ITRTs, who assist teachers with technology and software in the classroom, our technology staff, who maintain our network and servers, and our information system specialist, who maintains our PowerSchool database, which drives our ADM and many of our other items in which we do. This time, I believe I'm turning it back over.
And Mr. Callison, do you mind just going back two slides real quick to one more where the one more? Well, maybe we lost it. That's okay. You can go forward. I was gonna, actually, it was this one right here. Thank you. I just wanted to draw your attention to state and local revenue. Remember when Ms. Longus shared with the LCI, the goal of the state is to create a balance, statewide balance of 55% state, 45% local. You can see we're not too far off. in King William, right? So 13 state and then 11 as local revenue. You can see that we're sort of right around what that statewide average would be. So thank you. I wanted to share and spend just a moment or two and share some sample methodologies with you before we talk about the split levy. And there are lots of different ways to approach the construction of a budget, but we thought that a couple methodologies might be helpful for you. So we're going to take an imaginary high school of 1,000 students, because that's an easy number to play with. And we're going to assume that this school, this high school, has 300 students that were not as successful on their state assessments as we wanted them to be for whatever reason. We have 500 students who identify as economically disadvantaged, and some of these students could fall into multiple categories. This school has 150 students that are identified as students with disabilities, and statewide, the percentage of students with disabilities in public education is about 13 to 15%. Some school divisions are as high as 17 or 20%. Depends on locality. And then we have 50 students in this imaginary school that are identified as English learners. And an English learner is a student who lives in a home where English is not the primary language that's spoken. So the first sample methodology, and this is really just a kind of a philosophical framework that we wanted to share, is we're going to look at the type of student in this particular high school. So if you can see in that second column and in the first row that we have 1,000 students, right? So I've shared the same breakdown and the percentage of the student body that each of these groups is. But if you go to the weighted amount column, one of the things that you'll notice is across the board, this imaginary school and from its community, might receive $4,000 in funding per student. But that's going to assume that it costs the same amount of money to educate every student. And we know that it's a different amount of money in kindergarten compared to, for a student with a disability compared to a senior in high school that might be in all advanced placement college prep courses. You've got students that are in some of these categories that come from homes that may not be as supportive of education, and it might not have a parental or a family structure that can support school at home, where you have other students who every member in their household is bilingual, is gainfully employed, and speaks is a college graduate. So all of those characteristics come to bear. And so I share this with you because one philosophy might be, well, since it costs more to educate students that learn differently, then you can build a budget based on those differential costs. And so the example here is for a student that is a typical student, it might cost $4,000 a year. For a student that is below proficient, it might cost an additional $425 a year for that student to cover remediation, intervention, bus transportation to an after-school academy or whatever. I think the examples are long. Economically disadvantaged students might require a different level of family engagement and family support. Students with disabilities, they might require additional adults in the classroom and maybe even a personal assistant or speech or language or occupational therapy or physical therapy or vision services. So you can see how how looking at a budget this way can help you see that it doesn't cost the same amount of money to educate every student. And then the last one, you have English learners, and just as an example there, an additional $1,000 per student. And it may be because we need to hire a teacher who is an endorsed English language teacher to support those children. And a lot of this is driven by state code. So some of this we have to provide no matter what. So we'll go to the next example, and this might be, instead of type of student, let's look at type of staff. And one of the things that you should see is that both of these totals are the same. You know, the total in the bottom of the far right column is about $4.4 million. It's the same school, it's the same kids, it's just looking at their education through a different lens. So in this way, we're going to look at what we would like to be able to provide or what we have to provide based on state code. So for instance, state code says that every school in the Commonwealth has to have a principal. So we have to hire a principal. But state code also says that if it's an elementary school, you only need a part-time principal if there are fewer than 300 children. Well, it's going to be difficult to hire a part-time assistant principal, right? Most people want to work full-time. And so, but we're only funded, if you have a small elementary school, you're only going to receive enough state funding for half of that position. So the other half of that position is the responsibility of the locality. And we have lots and lots and lots of positions that aren't necessarily fully funded by the school division. But you can see here that if it were the will of the community or the desire of the community to provide a different level of services for its children, simply by changing the desired ratio, you can see how that might influence the budget. So for instance, in the top row, we have classroom teacher. We have 1,000 children, right, in our imaginary high school. And we've said, we think we can put 24 children in every classroom. So therefore, we only need 41.67 teachers. But some students have an individualized education plan, and they may have multiple disabilities with multiple needs. And there may be only 3 or 4 children in that classroom because they're wheelchair bound. They might need to be fed by the teacher. They might need to have help toileting, and they might need speech, OT, PT, and vision services. And there might be 4 children in the classroom and 3 adults. And so you can see what that might do to the formula there. So within our imaginary community, we said on that first line, we said as a general rule in general education, we don't want any of our kindergarten, 1st or 2nd grade classrooms to have more than 18 children. That changes your ratio. And so this just as another example of looking at a budget through a different lens. The first sample was the type of student, and this second sample is the type of position. And you can see then that decisions that we make influence or are influenced by the factors that the community or the school division thinks is most important. But at the end of the day, it ends up being the same amount of money. It's just a different lens that you look through. And I will say that as we go through our process, we look through lots of different lenses. So we don't necessarily have one methodology that we use, but it's important that we base all of our budget decisions on student needs, but we also have some staff needs as well. We do have some lingering challenges in the division. Just share these briefly with you. We have some unfilled positions, and as you know, recruitment and retention in public education is becoming more difficult. Our largest bubble of teachers in the school division happens to be in the 0 to 5 years of experience, and that's not too uncommon. So more and more people are entering public education thinking that it might not be the career for them, or they might be career switchers, or there's just there's a level of support that they need that maybe their school division isn't able to provide because of lack of experience or training or what have you. So we do have some unfilled positions. We are, we work to accommodate those as best we can. And some of the solutions that we've come up with are the best that we can make, but they're not ideal. So for instance, all of our world language instruction, not English, but French and Spanish, is done virtually. And that's not appealing to many people, but that's all we can do because we have not been able yet to hire in-person language teachers. So we do the best that we can to accommodate. And then some challenges at the bottom. So back to recruitment and retention, certainly salaries and benefits and being competitive is critical as well. You know, and I think the days are over when there's a line of English teachers, you know, waiting to interview for your one opening. You know, we are long past those days, especially in small and rural communities. So the last bullet's at the bottom: fuel, utility, and food prices. Fuel is if any of you are following the news and the crisis overseas in the Middle East, it's not unreasonable to expect fuel prices to increase at some point in the future. Utility, or very rarely does a utility company say that they're going to lower your rates. Technology upgrades, software and platform subscriptions, those continue to cost money. School divisions use it like any organization. We use a lot of technology. Even transportation and finance and food service all have technology platforms that they use. School safety is a big issue now. A conversation that I think our community needs to have with its new school board in the coming year is, to what extent do we want our schools to be safe places, and what kind of equipment or staffing does that involve? We haven't even talked here about school security officers. We have SROs, school resource officers, that are generously provided by the county, and we value those positions very well. But one school resource officer in a comprehensive high school probably is not enough, depending on what your definition of student safety is. And so that's going to be a conversation, and what other equipment might be necessary for the community to feel that its schools are safe. Instructional program enhancements, learning resources, manipulatives, textbooks, whether they're in paper or online, all of those are huge considerations, and school divisions need to wrestle with those each year. And curriculum changes come down from the state, pretty regularly. And then lastly, but certainly not least, capital improvements, as Ms. Longus said, and then just general maintenance improvements. So for instance, and we've talked about this, and I'll just share my perspective with you. We are so happy that you're here in person, but the metal chairs that you're sitting in aren't necessarily the most comfortable. So but the solution to purchase new chairs costs money. And do we purchase 150 new chairs for a new school board venue, or and if they're $20 a piece, or do we use that $3,000 to purchase plumbing supplies for bathrooms at the high school that students continue to do inappropriate things in? They're scratching the walls of the stalls and things like that. Those are considerations that show up every single day that a school division needs to address, and they cost money. And it's hard to predict what that is, but our director of operations, Mr. Stone, would be more than happy to share a long list of desired improvements that aren't necessarily capital, but range from new carpet, new floor tile, new paint, and maybe even new chairs. But we're lucky to have these. But I share that as an example because we have to make decisions about what it is that we're going to spend our money on. So with that, we'll turn. Please.
You talked a lot about how our population or student population can change and their needs are different. Can you talk about the state's expectations in regards to performance, student performance? Does that differ by child?
Oh, thank you. So appreciate the question. The state, we do have performance expectations for all students, and all students are expected to meet the same performance expectations depending on your diploma type. So for students that are on a standard or advanced diploma type, and you wouldn't know that until they were in high school. However, you would know that when they're younger, depending on whether or not they have an individualized education plan, or whether or not they're on an alternative assessment plan. And so for students that are on an alternative assessment plan, that's typically a very small percentage of children, and there's a separate accountability system for those children. But for other children who are in the general education curriculum, and like we shared on one of those slides in the high school example, remember 300 of those children were not successful. Some of those 300 children might have learning deficits. Some of those children might have not a support system at home. Some of those children might have trouble getting to school and attending school regularly. Some of those children may be food insecure. Some of those children may be homeless. And so, but all of the children, if they're in the general education curriculum, even if they're a student with a disability that's not on an alternative assessment plan, all of those children are expected to meet the same standard of accountability and the same standard of performance. It's a real challenge. And there's a cartoon that we could have put up here, and some of you may have seen this before, but it's a person who's standing in a park, and he's talking to a dog and a cat and a camel and a fish and a bird and something else. And he says, okay, and everybody, here's your test, climb that tree. And it sort of is illustrative of everybody has to meet the same standard, but some kids need a lot more support than others. So thank you. And here's Mrs. Stone. You want to sit here?
It doesn't matter. I'm good. I can stand up.
Okay.
So hello, everyone, and hopefully my voice, I will not start coughing. I think I was supposed to sit there until they talked to me and then they decided. Okay, no. So I'm here to talk about the split tax levy. This is very confusing, and I understand that it is, but there's
legislation in July of 2014 that established the split tax levy for the county. The county had it for decades before then. And I think we went back to the 1950s and found an attorney general's opinion that was issued to the county that says, you have to have legislation to do this. You can't just do it on your own, although that's what we were doing. So there are two counties in the state of Virginia that have a split tax rate, Westmoreland and King William County. And the reason why is they each have a town that operates their own school division, which is fine, not a problem. But in that situation, you have different people receiving the benefit of an education system. And then you have revenues that are associated with that benefit. And so if you're going to have that split tax rate, you have to ensure that the revenues that are dedicated for education go to education. And if they're not all spent, they have to be restricted for education. If you budget that you think we're going to get $100 of meals tax in a particular year, which goes to education, and $105 comes in, then the county has to reserve that $5 because the legislation says it's got to go to education. So how does it work? When you look at this diagram, when you look at our county as a whole, there are some residents in the town of West Point that pay certain taxes that the rest of us do not pay. We do not pay, I always use the meals tax as an example. We do not pay the town's meals tax unless we're eating in the town, in which case that goes to them. So they dedicate that revenue that is paid by their citizens to fund their schools. There are some tax rates or a portion of the real property, personal property, everyone across the county pays. There's a portion that all of us pay. That's the gold area. And I'm going to get into the revenues more. I'm probably going to cover this all with one slide. And what that goes to fund, excuse me, are the services that we all receive. So health and human services, public safety. There are services, parks and recreation. Those services, doesn't matter which district you live in within the county, you have access to those services. So the revenue that is paid by everyone should fund those services because everyone has access to it. Then there's some revenues, the split tax rate, the portion that we said is for schools. When you look at your tax, when you look at the county's budget adoption, they take the tax rate and they say, this portion is schools, this portion is for county government. It's for those other services. And then the portion that is for schools is supposed to come to schools, but then there are also some taxes that are only paid by districts 2 through 5. And an example of that is the meals tax. So if you're having a meal here in Central Garage, then that meals tax should go to fund a service that's received for the rest of the county. So that goes to funding education, just like if you're in the town of West Point having a meal, they dedicate all that meals tax to their education, to fund their education. So the idea here is just to assume that the people who are receiving the service are funding that service. And those of us, and if we're not receiving the service, we're not funding the service. So if you're not doing the calculation correctly, how much of the expense of the county is for education, you pull apart, let's take over here the amount, the cost associated with education, let's subtract from it those revenues that only paid by districts 2 through 5, such as the school portion of the real property, the personal property, different, subtract that. And then that remaining balance again has to be restricted for schools, or you work backwards and you can basically calculate what that rate should be. But what we had in the past was, unfortunately, that they would just have a rate, and at the end of the year, even if schools had some leftover money, let's say that in the state of Virginia, any revenues in excess of expenses at June 30th reverts back to the county. And the schools do not want to run out and spend every penny. I've worked places where you get to June 1st and everyone's running around and spending every penny that they have. But the idea is no, spend the money that you need to. If you end the year with excess balances, that's great, but that should go back to the county and be restricted for schools. So that's something that we get excited about. Let's see what the other slides say, just for fun. This talks about the different county funding sources, the piece of the property tax that is set by the county rate. Oh, I should mention, we stole these slides from Steve Hudgens with the county. He put them together a couple years ago. So I want to publicly say I'm using his slides because he did a good job. He has a great understanding of that.
He did provide them.
Oh, he did. So we did ask them.
Yeah.
So these rates may or may not be current. And then the county has certain state and federal revenue aid. They may get a state grant for a fire truck. Well, of course, that should be on the county side of the budget because that's public safety, that the entire county, no matter where you live, you receive the benefit of it. And then there's certain permits and fees that, again, are associated with county-wide expenses. Then if you go to the next one, the special taxing district, the only people that pay that portion of the property tax are the people who live in districts 2 through 5. They're paying it specifically for education. And then the sales tax, this state sales tax that comes through for education, certainly that should come that way. They actually receive the full of, they also receive another sales tax allocation the county does, that's for education. And they divide it based upon student population within the county, give the town their portion, give the schools their portion. And then there are other non-property taxes. And my example of a meals tax, it goes there because the county, I should have made this specific, this reference, but when you're in the town of West Point, you have the West Point meals tax that you pay, West Point keeps it. They do not, the county cannot force them to charge their tax. You're not paying the county meals tax and the town meals tax. You're only paying the town, they get to keep it. So when someone's paying the county meals tax, that should come on the side and help fund those services. It's only charged in districts 2 through 5, so it should fund the services that are only received by 2 through 5. So here's just another example of, referring to the importance of keeping those balances and ensuring, because basically, if you live in the town, then you want to make sure that the money that only the town is paying for is going towards a service that only the town receives. And if you live in the county in District 3 and you're helping to you're funding education year after year after year, you want to ensure that those funds are only going to education. They shouldn't be redirected to economic development or some other cause, because when the rate was set, the intent was education. And if not, your future taxes on the education side are going to go up and up, even though you've already paid those funds and they were not properly accounted for. And so that's why I always get on the soapbox. Not to say that they don't, but I get really excited about split tax rate because it's an accounting stream. You got to make sure that you're accounting for it and you're, keeping it all in line. So that's a quick high level. I think I'm out of slides, so I think we're good. So, okay, I think it's Q&A. I will give that back to you.
Thanks so much. Great explanation, and we're here to answer. As long as you want us to be here, we're here to help answer questions. I know we had said until 7 o'clock and it's 5 till, but we thought it was helpful to share some background information. But if any of you has a question, feel free to come to the podium, and that way the folks at home that are watching will also be able to hear, and we'll do our best to answer.
Can I mention one more thing?
Of course.
So Ms. Stone mentioned about the capital plan and carryover fund. So for the past few years, we've been very fortunate to only spend down on our actual budget for the year what was really needed. And we've been able to carry over funds in which we have been able to fund capital projects without having to do bond referendums or put off additional projects. We've done paving of parking lots that maybe we haven't been able to do for many years. We're buying school buses. So I do feel like we're being very good stewards of the funds and not just spending it to make sure it doesn't go because we won't get that money next year or whatever. We do use all of those carryover funds, and that's what we fund our capital plan. We did issue debt 2 years ago to do big HVAC work at some of the schools, but we have done a lot of things in-house lately with that capital fund. And during the budget process, you'll see our capital plan and you'll see how it's broken up with what we're funding out of our carryover funds. And so I just wanted to make sure I reiterated that.
You bet. Thank you. Any questions? Please, don't be shy. Yes, please.
I'm new to all this government stuff, and I really appreciate I'm learning and got a better understanding. One of the things I keep hearing, I've seen people come to the Board of Supervisors meetings, with the teachers' pay and benefits. Who's responsible for looking at the surrounding areas, looking at what those teachers are making, looking at what our teachers are making, and try to make it comparable to so they can attract the teachers and retain them? Who's responsible for that?
Yes, sir. So each year we take, during the budget process, we take a comparison, and we've already built it for this coming budget year using last year's pay scales. And we do everyone that touches us in a surrounding area. We do a comparison of what a teacher makes it at year 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and 30. So we're looking at that every year from that standpoint. Benefits, we're always constantly trying to negotiate better benefits for our teachers, one, to get the price down, but also we have been very lucky to attract teachers because we have a good benefits package from that situation. But that's something that we're looking at constantly year after year. Now, when we've done before I got here, this would be my 5th year. Before I got here, there were many years where raises weren't given. And a lot of times we followed kind of what the state has done. And so we've gotten into years that there's some compression. And so that's something that we're looking at, and Dr. Wagner's been very diligent about trying to look at that, and we're trying to work through that to see what we can do. But we do compare from year to year. And sometimes, like last year, we were only able to give a 5% raise. Some of our neighbors ended up giving a 7% raise. So we did lose teachers.
So who can we fuss at?
Many people. But yeah, so we are able, and our board did approve, the state did give us additional funding. And so we are moving to that 7% as of January. And instead of going to the Board of Supervisors and asking for additional funding from the county side, we're hoping to fund that with some of our vacancies for this year. But that's one of the things. So we are trying to constantly catch up. But yes, it is something that we look at very closely because retention of a teacher will cost us far less than having to recruit new ones down the road and then to train them up to that teacher that we lost.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
One last thing, Dr. Wagner, would you touch on that if our LCI goes up, it would take more local funding next year just to do nothing or, you know what I'm saying?
You want to talk to
I don't know.
Yeah. well,
Yeah.
I'll-
Yep.
But since I've been an elected official on both sides, so we talked about this is the year of the
LCI, the local composite index, they're gonna come out with the amount and say, your county can afford to pay X% of education. Well, if that moves up 2 or 5 percentage points, that means before we add, I won't be here, but before the next board adds, does anything new with a population change, or we have greater needs with our students, first, we need the funds to make up for that lost state revenue. Because just the change in that formula is going to take away state revenue. And the state's expectation is, they said your county can afford it and they should backfill that. And now, first you got to deal with that issue, and now you got to start balancing the new.
So
budget.
can I ask a question on that, Terry, while you're up there?
Yes.
So if it's only a half a point, any idea how much that really affects dollar wise or revenue wise?
I bet you this.
Or
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know that we calculated that. I don't know, I don't have it off the top of my head either. But you know, the state has a pot of money.
right,
And they're not changing that pot of money. What they are changing is what are those percentages each county is getting?
Yeah.
And so they look at those 3 factors, and I think we're pretty sure that with the reassessment, the values of our properties are going up. That's 50% of that formula.
true.
So
Okay.
out of the gate next year, you know that the LCI is going to increase, which is the state saying, we expect King William County local government they got to start funding more of this.
So it's probably leading up to the question I'm asked, is growth affected?
Let's think, I think that growth in terms of, yeah, because you know, it increases your tax, so they say.
Yeah, your tax
people in the
base.
state. You got more people within your local government, which should mean you have more housing, more taxpayers, and so, yeah, that definitely impacts your, your property tax.
Okay,
values.
now I'll tell the question. The future of growth in that county. I was in a meeting last night with some county, the EDA meeting, and I had a roundtable. In the future plans of the county, within the next 10 years, there's going to be 1,500 homes and apartments built. 1,500. That's already site plan approved. That's a lot. So, and within the next 10 years, is the school going to be able to keep up with that growth with all this? Somebody's going to build something, right? I mean, is that all being discussed with the Board of Supervisors or the county administration?
It has been, Mrs. Longest and I had a meeting with Mr. Ashcraft and Mr. Hudgens about 6 weeks ago or so. And that was one of the topics that we discussed, and it's certainly going to be another topic as we move forward. You know, from the school's perspective, I don't want anybody in the county to think that, and I'll just speak for myself, that my only answer as superintendent is new school, new school, new school.
Right.
It's all out, the county's gonna pay for it. I think we have to look at growth responsibly. We do have some capacity in some of our schools to accommodate more students. I think what we'll need to do, though, is start the conversation early about what is our, I guess, our max capacity. Some of this is dependent on programming as well. So, and you know, we're not going to go back a slide, but if our community believes in relatively small class sizes, and so the state of Virginia, for instance, says that a kindergarten class can have as many as 30 children. Well, You know, I disagree with that. I think kindergarten should be, you know, preschool should be much smaller than that, but there's a cost associated with it. So we'll begin to have conversations internally about what our capacity is, what our desired programming is. And by programming, if the community says we want more STEM opportunities in schools, then those are spaces that we need to try to find, that we can't necessarily put 24 kids into a classroom every day because we want this auxiliary space for student exploration. So instructional programming is gonna play a role in what our maximum capacity is. The type of students that we have will
Right.
determine their educational programming. But ultimately, if the growth that is being projected is realized, we're gonna have to have a short-term and a long-term plan to address it. And it may be that some expansion of schools is necessary, but obviously there's a cost associated with that, a community investment. That'll be a part of the conversation.
Well, that's the part that could affect that LCI. Yeah.
Well, again, that LCI changes every 2 years.
Yeah.
So the LCI that we're talking about now is that we're gonna learn about in November is good for the next 2 years. That might even be, and it's gonna change 2 or 3 times again before ground is broken, maybe on some of these.
And because this planned growth is already done, you know, 10 years is not that far away. It'll be here before you know it.
Well, and I think it's important for our community to hear and to know, and for folks that are here, that the decision to go forward with a new school. So let's say that we decided tonight that we were a decision-making body, the gavel went down, and our funding body supported the fact that we needed a new school, and we're gonna find a way to pay for it. But the decision is that we need a new school. Let's say it's an elementary school. You're not even gonna have an architectural plan for 12 months. And then after that, it's gonna be 24 months at the very least in that. So we're looking, you know, even just the decision to do something is a 3 or 4 year decision. And so we're aware of that, and we're gonna make sure that our community partners are aware of that as well. But we want to make the most responsible decisions that we can so that we don't haggle over what we know is necessary. We want to make sure that we can make mutual decisions together that are going to have that mutual benefit.
Thank you.
Please, thank you.
I am Stephen Green. I'm third district supervisor. I had a couple of questions, maybe based to the school boards. I'll bring those up at the school board because that's, like I said, this is just a town hall meeting. And I had a general idea. This is something to throw in, and maybe Ms. Stone maybe had some of these ideas when we were both on the school board together. And we had a litigation with this split levy. What I've always envisioned, like you said, we're looking down the road, we're going to have some growth. So that's no way you can stop growth. We're a country that's growing. We're not gonna, like you said, it's about income. We're not gonna go down. We're always gonna go up. But well, on that point, we just did, but school board came to us and you all know rumors on Facebook are not true. So just, we have I know everything on the internet is true. No, we have bought land in anticipation, 10 to 20 years down the road, 120 acres to facilitate new schools. So the process that started, as you said, there's no plans, there's no building design. We don't even know what size really, at least the process has started. So we're looking forward to working with the new board. When I'm going to be on our board, but some people have backed out graciously. And really helped me learn a lot when she was on our board. But what my question was, and this is the town hall meeting, the overall view, and I've been wanting this for the whole 12 years I've been there, trying to save money. Everybody's, what can we do to save money? My opinion is some of the basic expenses of this county is for that exact reason. In which just 2 counties have the split levy, Westmoreland and us. If that wasn't there, if we could somehow work together, get all both school boards to go together, Oh, why can't, we would save a lot of money, because it's only, what, 4 to 6 schools in the total both districts, but we have 2 complete school boards. We have, I'm just throwing it out. Like a
Correct.
School thing.
So no, yes, as one board member, but I don't, this is a hot topic and I don't want staff to take a politically charged.
Oh,
hot
no,
topic.
I'm not
But,
saying that, no.
no. I will just say you, and you were there in 2014.
Exactly.
There was great resistance by the town.
Mhm.
And the town has decided they want their own school division. They're very
Exactly.
proud of it. That's what they want. And so, and as a result, they're paying for it. You know, the town pays for that school district. That's why they pay that separate little circle of tax.
Extra tax.
So I think
Exactly.
until they make the decision of,
Oh,
we
of
don't want
course.
to pay this,
No,
we want to consolidate and enjoy the,
Right.
you know, that those efficiencies and save some money. You know, that was one of the things we found out when we went through that
exactly.
conversation. They want their own school
Mhm.
division and they're willing to pay for it.
Right.
So we just have to make sure the funds we're paying for education.
Cover the rest of the county.
Yeah.
And another thing is, it's
Save it all.
the 3 big businesses that we have, if 1 or 2 of them would fail, I hate to think, it's probably not even worth going there, but let's say it went under. I mean, I don't know if they'd be able to support their school system. So, I mean, just saying. Everybody's complaining about taxes are too high, so I don't. And the other thing, just curious about the sample methodologies you had there. There was no mention of the average or even the above average students. It looked like you had a total of 1,000, but they were all in the category that was below or needed extra help or something like that. Do we not have below or needed extra help or something like that? Do we not have any students that are average or even some that are above average that, or I don't know.
Actually, it's a fair question, and
I don't know.
one of the struggles is that
Okay.
you run out of rows to fit on a slide. But you
Exactly.
certainly could add an above average learner. And actually, you know, I'll share the example. We currently pay tuition for students to attend offsite programs to provide advanced level learning for those students. We do the same thing in schools. One of the positions that I don't know, Mr. Kellison, if you want to go to the lingering slide a little bit after. But there, yeah, the personnel, one of those instructional vacancies is a gifted and talented teacher.
Okay.
So there's a cost associated with that.
Mhm.
The position is posted and we have interviewed for the position. But there are reasons why that position, you know, can't be filled at the moment based on the circumstances at hand, but nonetheless, there is a cost, an additional cost for high ability students. And I know that we have folks on our current school board that would like, and even in our community that would like to see us spend even more on students that are ready for acceleration and ready for a new challenge. And I am all for it. So we could just as easily add that sample student or that student title on that spreadsheet. Thank you.
The one other thing I wanted to mention off this slide is the where you see speech and OT. We want to have those positions in-house. We currently contract with a company, so we have those services, they're just contracted out. And when we could bring them in-house with qualified staff, then we can give them additional training and opportunity. And usually in a whole package, an employee on board is more effective and efficient and affordable than a contracted company that has an overhead. So I just wanted to explain that on here. We have those in place, but to explain that they're through a contract vendor, if we could bring them in-house, it would be the ideal situation.
Other questions? Okay, well, seeing none and hearing none, we will stay here in the room and at the table if you'd like to have some formal conversation afterward. And we'll stay for a few minutes or as long as it takes, but want to thank each of you for being here, and for folks that are listening at home, we want to thank you for being there as well, and feel free to reach out to any of us in the division staff to ask any questions One of the last things that I'll say, I know we've got some folks who are interested in the school board here tonight as well, in addition to Mrs. Stone. The conversations that we'll have with the current school board about budget and about any considerations, that's going to change because our school board is going to change. And Mrs. Frazier is here as well. Mrs. Frazier, thank you for being here. We're going to have a new school board in January, and most of the budget conversations that we'll have will be with a new board. So I hope that you found this information tonight helpful, and I know that at some point after November 7th, we're going to be reaching out to folks and trying to start the process of board education and budget education as quickly as we can, so that when we get to January, we can hit the ground running and make some good decisions. So anyway, thank you all very much. Again, we're here for you, and hope you have a great evening and a great weekend, and we'll see you next time.